It's a common misconception that comedians are hilarious because they're happy, but this is frequently untrue. The ideal illustration of a man who fought depression his entire life and made so many people laugh with his self-deprecating humor is Rodney Dangerfield. Dangerfield's early life gave him plenty of cause for depression. His father abandoned his family, his mother was cold and unloving. In his later life, Dangerfield suffered wild mood swings and sometimes stayed in bed all day under the covers, refusing to come out. In his autobiography, It's Not Easy Bein Me, Dangerfield wrote that the worst depression he experienced occurred when he was in his 70s, saying it was a bad one. For 2 years, I couldn't function. He was on a large number of prescriptions, and as his overall health failed, he found himself taking more than 100 pills a day. Dangerfield also admits he self-medicated to treat his depression with both alcohol and marijuana. In fact, Dangerfield loved the latter. He smoked pot every day for 60 years and wanted to title his autobiography My Love Affair with Marijuana. In addition to being an unhappy, confused, and melancholy man, he also experienced other incidents in his life that may have contributed to his demise. Well, join us today as we dive deep into Rodney Dangerfield's bizarre life, and please don't forget to let us know in the comments section who you would want us to talk about next time. Rodney Dangerfield remains one of the most recognizable faces and voices in pop culture. His comic persona as a miserable, set-upon everyman who got no respect was something that every member of his audience could relate to. Dangerfield somehow achieved the impossible. He made being an unhappy, middle-aged man somehow cool and hip. He also made an old-school style of stand-up comedy with roots in the Borscht Belt and vaudeville into an ultra-modern, carefully calibrated routine that was honed into a series of diamond-like one-liners. Those one-liners were the secret. They were consistently hilarious. When Dangerfield said, "I could tell that my parents hated me, my bath toys were a toaster and a radio," or "I worked in a pet store and people kept asking how big I'd get," he tapped into a deep well of self-loathing that had everyone in stitches. But that self-loathing and sadness wasn't an act. Rodney Dangerfield was a perfect example of the old adage that comedy is tragedy plus time. Although the sweaty sad sack he presented on stage was a carefully constructed persona that he honed over the course of decades, Dangerfield's life was more complex than most people know. On stage, Rodney Dangerfield made frequent jokes about his unloving mother and his miserable childhood. As it turns out, those jokes were based on a very real, very miserable childhood. Rodney Dangerfield was born Jacob Rodney Cohen in Deer Park, New York, on November 22, 1921. He was the son of Jewish parents Dorothy Dottie Teitelbaum and the vaudevillian performer Philip Cohen, whose stage name was Philroy. His father, Philip Cohen, was rarely home. His son normally saw him only twice a year. Dangerfield's mother was cruel and cold to him his entire life. Throughout his childhood, she never kissed or hugged him or showed him any sign of affection. In an interview with Howard Stern on May 25, 2004, Dangerfield told Stern that he had been molested by a man in his neighborhood. The man would pay Rodney a nickel and kiss him for 5 minutes. After Cohen's father abandoned the family, his mother moved him and his sister to Kew Gardens, Queens, where Dangerfield attended Richmond Hill High School. When he was still a very young child, he experienced anti-Semitism from his classmates as well as his teachers. To support himself and his family because his father had left, Dangerfield had to go to work as a child, selling ice cream, making deliveries, and even driving a fish truck just to keep food on the table. One thing is for sure, when Dangerfield once said he would choose a different mother, different father, different sister, different everything, he wasn't joking. Rodney Dangerfield grew up poor and had to work a long list of odd jobs to help support his family. Back in the 1920s and 1930s, when Dangerfield was growing up, a nickel was a lot of money, and that led to one of the saddest stories of Dangerfield's childhood. Dangerfield was, more or less, totally unsupervised as a child. When he was as young as 5 years old, he took to wandering his neighborhood. According to Dangerfield's autobiography, It's Not Easy Bein Me, on one of these walks, he was approached by a man who offered him a nickel to sit on his lap. Dangerfield happily agreed. He sat on the man's lap and the man held him and kissed him on the lips for several minutes. Unaware of what was happening, Dangerfield returned to the man's office many times to get another nickel. Although he jokes that this made him a male hooker at the age of 5, he closes the anecdote with a bitter admonition, "Thanks for looking after me, ma." When asked years later about the impact of that incident, Dangerfield admitted that "I could have come out being a nasty person, but somehow things went the other way." Rodney Dangerfield's father was in show business, performing as a juggler and comic. Although Phil Roy abandoned his family shortly after his son was born, Dangerfield found himself following in his father's footsteps. According to Rolling Stone, Dangerfield began writing jokes when he was just 15 years old, and he speculates that it might have been a way to escape the crushing depression of his childhood. He worked hard, getting a gig working in the Catskills for a summer, but then hit a professional wall. At the age of 19, he legally changed his name to Jack Roy. He struggled financially for 9 years, at one point performing as a singing waiter until he was fired, before taking a job selling aluminum siding in the mid-1950s to support his wife and family. He got married to singer Joyce Indig, who also gave up her career aspirations to start a family. He later quipped he was so little known that when he gave up show business that "I was the only one who knew I quit." In the early 1960s, he started reviving his career as an entertainer. Still working as a salesman by day, he returned to the stage, performing at hotels in the Catskill Mountains, but still finding minimal success. He fell into debt, about $20,000 by his own estimate, and couldn't get booked. Dangerfield came to realize that what he lacked was an image, a well-defined onstage persona that audiences could relate to, one that would distinguish him from other comics. After being shunned by some premier comedy venues, he returned home, where he began developing a character for whom nothing goes right. Roy took the name Rodney Dangerfield from an episode by Jack Benny on his radio program in a 1941 broadcast. The name was referenced as an actor who Jack had invited to his upcoming Christmas party, but Mary Livingstone had never heard of him. The name surfaces again in the December 15, 1946 episode as a movie star on Jack's Christmas card list. In his autobiography, It's Not Easy Bein Me, Dangerfield writes that he gave up when he was 28 years old. He was tired of the endless travel and the pressures of not quite succeeding in show business. But Dangerfield never stopped writing jokes. And he soon discovered that two people giving up their dreams and starting a family didn't necessarily make for perfect happiness. After divorcing his first wife in 1961 at age 40, Dangerfield decided to give show business another chance. Rodney Dangerfield's career was unusual in many ways. One of the most surprising facts is that he was nearly 50 years old when he finally found success as a comedian. In fact, according to the New York Times, Dangerfield didn't hit his professional peak until he was nearly 60 years old. After giving the show business another chance, he struggled for a while. But that struggle led him to perfect what would become his persona, an unhappy, put-upon middle-aged man who got no respect. Armed with a clear persona that everyone in his audience could relate to and trimming his jokes down until they were nothing more than setup and punchline, he once said he would work for 3 months on 6 minutes of material. He began to find success. As he writes in his autobiography, It's Not Easy Bein Me, in 1963, he landed an audition to appear on The Ed Sullivan Show and aced it. He became a regular on the show and began appearing on other TV shows. In 1969, Rodney Dangerfield's career was picking up steam, but he was still just a working comedian, not a superstar. Dangerfield had 2 children and a complicated marriage. All the travel and pressure of showbiz was taking its toll. So, despite his relatively recent success, Dangerfield decided to open his own club. He had to borrow $250,000 in order to do it. According to the book Make 'Em Laugh, Dangerfield's became known in the industry as a place where young, unknown comedians could get a toehold in the business. Rodney Dangerfield was not only well known for his support of young comedians, he also used the club as the venue for a series of HBO specials that helped launch comics such as Jerry Seinfeld, Roseanne Barr, and Jim Carrey. The club was so successful Dangerfield was able to pay back his investors just a year and a half after opening. In the mid-1970s, Rodney Dangerfield had achieved what had once seemed impossible. The man who had quit the business for 10 years and relaunched his career in his 40s was a star. He appeared regularly on late-night television and had a steady string of sold-out, live performances. But he wasn't yet a superstar. For that, he needed primetime screen time. First came a series of comedic commercials for Miller Lite beer. The first of these ensemble ads aired in 1977 and featured a mix of athletes and other celebrities including Dangerfield. According to the New York Times, by 1981 they'd filmed more than 70 of the commercials, many of which featured Dangerfield doing his classic no respect shtick. In 1980, Dangerfield had his second major film role. He'd appeared in the obscure 1970 film The Projectionist. This was Dangerfield's breakout role and elevated him to true star status. 3 years later, he appeared in his first starring role in Easy Money, and 3 years after that, he starred in Back to School, which was a massive hit. It was one of the first comedies to earn more than $100 million at the box office. Dangerfield was 65 years old and finally a superstar. By 1988, Rodney Dangerfield was a big star in America. He was very much in demand in Las Vegas, where AP News reports he'd appeared close to 1,000 times by March 1988. That streak ended, however, when Dangerfield had an accident with a malfunctioning steam bath at Caesar's Palace, where he'd signed a contract to perform. Dangerfield missed 5 shows as a result of eye injuries. When he learned that Caesars was withholding his fee for those 5 shows as a result, he walked out of a packed house, telling the audience to get their money back. According to the Los Angeles Times, the lawsuits started flying. Dangerfield sued, seeking $5 million plus $45,000 for each of the 5 shows he missed, blaming the hotel for installing a faulty steam bath. Caesar's Palace countersued for breach of contract, seeking $100,000. The hotel hired a doctor who testified that Dangerfield could have performed and claimed the comedian had gone out partying when he was supposedly incapacitated. The jury came back in favor of Dangerfield, awarding him $500,000 for pain and suffering and $225,000 for the missed performances. And Dangerfield had the last laugh, signing on to perform at Bally's across the street. When Rodney Dangerfield was approaching his 30s, his attempts to launch a career in comedy had gone nowhere. When he met a singer named Joyce Indig, he decided to give up his dreams and got married on October 3, 1951. Indig also gave up her singing career. The marriage was tumultuous. Dangerfield describes it as a real mixed-up affair. Dangerfield became a father at the age of 39, and the couple had 2 children, Brian, who was born in 1960, and Melanie, born after her parents remarried. Their marriage ended shortly after Brian's birth, with the couple divorcing in 1962 after 13 years. The divorce didn't stick, though Dangerfield married Indig a second time in 1963, only to divorce her again in 1970. In 1975, Indig passed away and Dangerfield was left to raise their children by himself. Far from the crazy life of a famous person, Dangerfield lived with his kids and, for many years, his best friend Joe Ansis in his Manhattan apartment. When Joyce Indig passed away in 1975, Dangerfield remained single for a long time. He met a woman named Joan Child when he walked into her flower shop in Santa Monica in 1983. Dangerfield was in town working a fitness program, and the two hit it off almost immediately. They took things slow, however, they dated for a decade before finally deciding to make it official and get married. When they wed in 1993, Joan was 41 and Dangerfield was 72. According to ABC News, when Dangerfield was promoting his 2000 film, My 5 Wives, the couple staged a recommitment ceremony to confirm their devotion. Although Jewish, Dangerfield referred to himself as an atheist during an interview with Howard Stern on May 25, 2004, about 4 months before his death. Dangerfield added during the interview that he was a logical atheist, adding, We're gorillas. Does a gorilla come back? In the same interview, he lamented that he suffered greatly for being a perfectionist. He also said, "My mother never hugged me, kissed me, nothing, okay?" Other kids would go to sleep listening to a fairy tale. I went to sleep with a fight downstairs, listening to a guy yelling, "Enough." Rodney Dangerfield was never much of a health nut. The AV Club reports that he was a heavy smoker most of his life. In his autobiography, It's Not Easy Bein Me, Dangerfield admits he would often walk around with 3 different packs of cigarettes. He struggled to quit, often rewarding himself for going a day without smoking by smoking. That, combined with a not particularly healthy diet and a lack of exercise, left Dangerfield in fragile health in his later years. As reported by the Spokesman Review, Dangerfield suffered a mild heart attack in 2001 while performing on The Tonight Show. On his 80th birthday, host Jay Leno actually noticed something was off and called paramedics while Dangerfield was on stage. ABC News reports that Dangerfield soon needed a heart bypass, but doctors were concerned about his blood flow, so he first had to undergo brain surgery. He came through that successfully in 2003. Sadly, when he went back to the hospital months later for the heart surgery, he suffered a stroke and then slipped into a coma. Amazingly, he was brought out of his coma when his wife asked if he wanted to see an X-rated cartoon Dangerfield thought was hilarious. According to his autobiography, the caption was "Surprise Balloon." That roused him back to consciousness, but he passed away a few weeks later at the age of 82. When Dangerfield passed away in 2004, the couple had been together for more than 20 years and Joan was given control over Dangerfield's estate and intellectual property. According to Reuters, she hasn't been afraid to sue to enforce that control, even taking her own stepdaughter to court over footage of Dangerfield performing. Her attorney asserted all copyrights to Rodney Dangerfield's act are held by Joan Dangerfield, who owns all of her late husband's intellectual property. In memoriam, Saturday Night Live ran a short sketch of Dangerfield played by Darrell Hammond at the gates of heaven. St. Peter mentions that he heard Dangerfield got no respect in life, which prompts Dangerfield to spew an entire string of his famous one-liners. After he's done, he asks why St. Peter was so interested. St. Peter replies, "I just wanted to hear those jokes one more time," and waves him into heaven, prompting Dangerfield to joyfully declare, "Finally, a little respect." On September 10, 2006, Comedy Central's Legends, Rodney Dangerfield commemorated his life and legacy. Featured comedians included Adam Sandler, Chris Rock, Jay Leno, Ray Romano, Roseanne Barr, Jerry Seinfeld, Bob Saget, Jerry Stiller, Kevin Kline, and Jeff Foxworthy. In 2007, a Rodney Dangerfield tattoo was among the most popular celebrity tattoos in the United States. On The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, May 29, 2009, Leno credited Dangerfield with popularizing the style of joke he had long been using. The format of the joke is that the comedian tells a sidekick how bad something is, and the sidekick, in this case, guitar player Kevin Eubanks, sets up the joke by asking just how bad that something is. Before he died in March 1995, Dangerfield was the first celebrity to personally own a website and create content for it. He interacted with fans who visited his site via an email me link, often surprising people with a reply. By 1996, Dangerfield's website proved to be such a hit that he made Website Magazine's list of the 100 most influential people on the web. Well, after his passing, the official Rodney Dangerfield website was nominated for a Webby Award after it was relaunched by his widow, Joan Dangerfield, on what would have been his 92nd birthday, November 22, 2013. Since then, Dangerfield has been honored with 2 additional Webby Award nominations and 1 win. In 2014, Dangerfield was awarded an honorary doctorate posthumously from Manhattanville College, officially deeming him Dr. Dangerfield. Beginning on June 12, 2017, Los Angeles City College Theater Academy hosted the first class of the Rodney Dangerfield Institute of Comedy. The class is a stand-up comedy class which is taught by comedian Joni Wilkes, aka Joni Coyote. In August 2017, a plaque honoring Dangerfield was installed in Kew Gardens, his old Queens neighborhood. In 2019, an inscription was made to the Wall of Life at Hebrew University's MT Scopus campus that reads, "Joan and Rodney Dangerfield." Well then, thanks for joining us in today's video, and please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more amazing videos.